All right, guys, welcome to Line Movement. It is Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, which means it's time for our kickoff show. There is no Dieter this week, but when God closes a Dieter, he opens a Peter in the hosting chair. And to fill the void, we have brought in a ringer, a friend of the show, our guy, Ben Gretch. You know him from Stealing Signals. Check out his newsletter on Substack. Ben, thanks for joining Joe and I today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. This is going to be kind of a wild day. We've had a lot of news, and just since last night, but looks like things are looking up this morning.
Yeah, it is. It's actually just literally seconds ago, Schefter reported that we are going to get this Chiefs-Patriots game as scheduled. They have set it for Monday night at 7:05 p.m. Eastern. That's going to be on CBS, so we get a little Monday night doubleheader. But, Joe, we can save that for tomorrow. How are you feeling about today's slate?
I'm feeling good. Happy to have Ben with us. I don't know if we've really caught him up, but since Dieter's not here, someone's going to have to talk to us about what tight end we're going to play. I guess because Dieter's been walking in and being like, hey, let's just play Jordan Reed for 2 touchdowns the week before he actually did it. So a little bit of a post-hype there. But yeah, without Dieter's fire tight end takes, I don't know what we're going to do without him, man. But good thing we got Ben here with us.
Yeah, so Ben, Dieter is our boots on the ground in San Francisco. You are our boots on the ground in parts unknown in the Pacific Northwest. Do you have any, Seattle-informed takes for us today?
Russell Wilson's really good.
Nice.
I'll allow it.
I like this guy.
Yeah, so we'll get to that game in a. Oh, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, what is there to not know about Seattle at this point? I mean, they're letting Russ cook, so.
I know. I was back to the drawing board with my lineups, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to go back to that Russ double stack. I mean, if it's not broken, why fix it? We'll get to that game in a sec. Let's start off here at the top with this New Orleans game, -3 favorites at Detroit here. Let's go to Joe first. How are you feeling about this game, either from a betting perspective or some fantasy plays, which looked somewhat in doubt last night, but we are good to go.
Yeah, I saw that message you put in our chat with Leone, and I realized that I probably should just go to bed because the slate could just be completely different in the morning. Was happy that I woke up and found out I can still play Alvin Kamara on almost all my teams, which would be great. I think the biggest question mark from a DFS perspective is this Adam Trautman guy at 2,500. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think about him at the Stone Min on DraftKings. From a betting perspective, I think this game shapes up relatively well for points, but I think it's kind of a stay away relative to where this line has moved for me. Pretty tight spread overall. So not a lot of takes, I guess, from a betting perspective on this game, but I think the fantasy implications are huge.
Ben, Alvin Kamara obviously going to be mega chalk in this game. Any other players that are jumping out to you?
Yeah, you guys cued me in by saying I got to have some tight end takes. Well, I think it's a good week to get to TJ Hawkinson if you can and in salary. The Saints have been absolutely smashed by tight ends. So he's one of my favorite tight end plays on the entire slate. I'm glad that we have this game because I'm going to be very heavy on Kamara as well. And then Hawkinson was a guy that I was really looking forward to playing. Trautman is a tough one. I think I'm probably going to go there in cash just because it opens up, what I want it to open up in terms of, Tyler Lockett and some other spots. But I don't know that I'm going to probably play him in a lot of tournaments. I don't really feel very confident in his, upside.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The upside, it's not like even Jared Cook has been going nuclear in this offense. So I think you've got to wonder what Troutman's real upside is. We have a question in the chat from Ben, a Ben to a Ben perhaps. Can these two teams sustain a shootout? Seems like a slow game. I guess the Lions have been wanting to establish the run with Adrian Peterson, but to me, this seems like a game that could shoot out here. Joe, what do you think about the pace?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that the shootout potential of it's even a little bit more interesting because there's different ways you can go on the Detroit side of the ball. I definitely agree with Ben that Hawkinson's the guy. For me, if I'm bringing one bring back, I think that Galladay is actually really interesting at 6K in tournaments if he ends up being lower owned, but I'm actually seeing him come in around 15%. So maybe that's gained some steam over the week. So I think that this game should shape up for points. I'm not really on Marvin Jones. So if he ends up being the guy that goes crazy, it's going to not be a great week for me overall. I think that both these quarterbacks are interesting from like a real life or season long perspective, but I rarely play these guys that don't give us anything on the ground from a DFS perspective. But is Drew Brees done? I guess that's the big question. But I think that there's a lot of ways that we can go about getting access to this game without playing the quarterbacks.
Real quick, Gretch, any love for more off the board plays like Traquan Smith or Marvin Jones in this game?
Marvin Jones is somewhat interesting. Obviously, Galladay is probably going to get the Lattimore shadow. I think Galladay is talented enough to win there too, and I like that call. But if the targets go elsewhere, I'm liking Hawkinson, but I could certainly see Marvin Jones. I have a really hard time with the downfield options for the Saints right now. I mean, Breeze has always had that really low average throw depth, but it's ridiculously low right now. He had a big box score last week, but Alvin Kamara was a leading receiver. I think he was right around 150 receiving yards and literally had more yak than receiving yards. His average catch was behind the line of scrimmage. So you're kind of just banking on Alvin Kamara doing a lot after the catch if you're playing Drew Brees in any format. I'm certainly not playing him in DFS. And I think that is really limiting for the upside of guys like Traquan. I do kind of like the question about it, maybe this being a slower paced game, because you're relying a little bit on some of the skill position players like Kamara to do things after the catch, and the Lions do want to run the ball. Saints on the road. It wouldn't be that surprising if this went under to me.
Yeah. All right, let's move on here to this Arizona at Carolina game. DeAndre Hopkins looks like he's going to go. He's tweeting out GIFs overnight that seem vaguely playful, like he isn't too concerned about the ankle injury. Arizona is a 3-point favorite on the road. Lots of interesting pieces here for DFS. Holka, what do you think about this line? It is an over under 51.5. So one of our 7 or 8 spreads that are over 50 this week.
Yeah, I like the over in this game. It's one we talked about since the start of being one that could be an up-tempo spot overall. I think from a DFS perspective, there's some guys in this game that are drastically underpriced. Like we have DJ Moore at 5,600. Honestly, he's just priced there because he hasn't scored a touchdown yet. He's still someone that is giving us everything else we need on the back end in terms of his air yards, his target share, all of those things. Mike Davis is someone that I've taken the L on basically every show this week because I didn't think he'd be able to come in and take this role from Christian McCaffrey, at least a large percentage of the role through the air. I didn't see that one coming. So I think at 5,700, he's someone that is going to be very chalky on DraftKings for good reason. So I'm on board with that. I think that there's a couple of guys in this game that could go a little bit under-owned. We talked about Hopkins, like he is so expensive at 8,500 on DraftKings, and people see this questionable tag next to his name. Maybe no one plays him. I kind of wish this game was in the afternoon because I think Hopkins would have made a really nice leverage play if you needed a late swap, something like that. But I'm intrigued, even though I don't typically pay up for wide receivers at this level. I think I'm intrigued by him in large field tournaments. Kenyon Drake, someone that really hasn't gotten there for us yet, even though he's been seeing a lot of opportunities. So at some point, I do expect him to have a big game. I'm hoping that I have enough time to hold out and be there for it, but I don't know. I've given away a lot of money with some Kenyon Drake one-off so far, so we'll see if this week's the week.
Gretch, one of the interesting nuggets from your Stealing Signals newsletter this week was kind of how DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson are being used and maybe differently than conventional wisdom. Do you want to tell the people about how their roles are maybe reversed based on perception?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to Robbie Anderson. We all expected him to be the deep threat, and with this kind of spread it out college style offense, they're running him a lot more across the field. We're seeing a lot more of, using his speed horizontally than vertically. He's catching a lot more targets in shallower areas, which is not really what I expected. It's obviously great news for Anderson, and I think he's going to stick. Like, I think he's going to have a good season in this role. Moore's been then the more vertical guy of the two, which is not necessarily what we expected. He's never really had like a super low ADOT. I think he's kind of always been thought of as that. He's been more like right around average. He still gets pushed downfield a little bit, but this year it's been pretty high. I would like to see Moore get more catches around the line of scrimmage with his after the catch ability, but we're not necessarily seeing that. I do think this is a great spot for those guys, though, and Davis. I mean, Arizona obviously runs a lot of plays. We know Carolina probably will play up tempo with them. So there's going to be a bump in volume. Hopefully, we get some Kyler production early, and then you're looking at maybe Bridgewater throwing 40 plus times, and that would be pretty good for Moore, Mike Davis, all those guys. I'm comfortable playing them in the same lineups.
We just dropped the link to Ben's newsletter in the chat. Definitely subscribe to that if you guys haven't. Also, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We will be here every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then Joe, Leone, and I, of course, at 6:30 p.m. Eastern today for the Tilt Space, sweating our lineups that we have yet to finalize. We'll be doing that right after the show. But Holka, Kenyon Drake, he's a guy that's been burning people. The carries are there. He hasn't been in the end zone since week 1. Is this the Kenyon Drake week?
I hope so, man, because there's a larger argument in favor of going back to him just because I think the volume still has been so solid overall. I think that people have kind of talked themselves out of it. So I'm kind of interested from a tournament perspective for sure. I was just looking to see what Kenyon Drake's prop was through the air, 18.5 yards at blitzbet.eu so far. So I think I might be on the underside of that, which makes me a little bit more scared, I guess, overall. But yeah, I think going back to Kenyon Drake, I wish we didn't have so many good running back plays this week because then maybe it would be an easier leverage play to make. But there's a lot of good plays at running back this week. So if I jump off, that would be everyone's cue to jump back on because this is probably the week then.
Yeah. Kenyon Drake at 15% ownership is what I'm seeing right now. Ben, I think people might not realize that Chase Edmonds is really eating into his passing work.
Yeah, Edmonds is also being used differently. He's actually seeing, not a lot. Running back air yards are not a thing that we see a ton of typically, but he's actually seeing a little bit of downfield work and actually some positive air yards. Kenyon Drake has negative air yards to this point. The targets he is seeing are behind the line of scrimmage. And Edmonds is seeing a much higher rate of targets per route run. Drake is still running a decent amount of routes, but that actually carries into last year where Edmonds was targeted at a pretty high rate when he was out there running routes. And we didn't see that as much from Drake after he came over to Arizona last year as well. So I think at this point we have a pretty decent sample that Drake is just not someone that they are looking to get the ball to in the passing game. Now, obviously on the ground, this could be the blow up spot for him rushing the ball, right? I mean, Carolina's rush defense has been kind of the nut spot for, dating back to the end of last year as well. So I'm certainly going to have a little bit of Drake. He's not one of my favorite plays, but I'm kind of like Holka. I don't want to miss on it. It feels like he's either going to smash or be another disappointment. It's the boom bust type feel here.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to use Drake in one-off situations because I like other guys better, but I do have a Bridgewater double stack where I don't mind bringing it back with Drake, just with the assumption that maybe they get it done on the ground and then the Panthers have to play catch up. Let's move to this Cincinnati-Jacksonville game. Cincinnati, 2.5 point home favorites versus Jacksonville, over under 49 here. Joe, I feel like people aren't really talking about this game much at all. It seems based on the total, though, that we could still see some fantasy points.
I kind of like this game. I think this is like a lot of times we have these weeks where there's some very clear game stack spots where there's going to be points. I think this is one that, like you said, no one's like really talking about yet. I do like Joe Burrow because he's kind of that like natural price pivot off of someone like Deshaun Watson, who will be extremely popular. If you get him at sub 5% ownership, pair him with Tyler Boyd, pair him with someone that should have some positive regression coming in AJ Green. I think that makes a ton of sense. I think on the other side of the ball, James Robinson at 6,500, like he's probably a little bit too expensive relative to his role, but I think this is a great spot for him to kind of continue to have that, I guess, that role at the goal line is very valuable for someone like him. I think that the volume isn't quite as enticing as some of the other guys in his price range. So from a tournament perspective, I think he's the bring back on Jacksonville I like the most. But yeah, I think that game stacks only, but I do think it's interesting.
Ben Gretch is one of the co-presidents of the LaVisca Chenault fan club. Can we play some Visca today?
Oh man, I want to, and I do have a lineup with him. I don't think he's necessarily a good play today, but that doesn't mean I'm going to not play him. I do have a couple, cheaper large field Burrow, AJ Green, Visca stacks. I think AJ Green is the guy that is really interesting in this game. The volume is still really, really high, but everyone thinks last week that T. Higgins overtook that downfield role. All the air yards did go towards Higgins. But I don't necessarily think that means Green is not going to see volume. The question obviously is he done? Is he washed? Is he dust? He's still second in the NFL in air yards entering this week. So it's hard for me to just completely go away from that and be certain that from a skill level standpoint, he's not there. Burrow's going to throw a lot. This game has a high total. I kind of like this game as well as sneaky. And Green's a tough guy to have a lot of exposure to, but I'm still going to sprinkle him in a little bit.
Yeah, this is the age-old question. Is AJ Green dust or not? Ben Gretch doubling down on that volume. Holka, which side are you on? I'm taking the dust side. Are you on dusted or do?
I'm with Ben. I think that he's a guy that I'm still all over. Like you mentioned, the air yards are still there. Like last week, yeah, he saw a little bit less opportunity, but I'm not ready to fade him yet. I'll say this: I'm not willing to fade him, but I'm also not really excited to watch him play football anymore because he's not really separating a ton. It's kind of it's weird. His movement seems so much different than it used to out there. So I don't know if he's washed by any means. I still care more about the volume that he's seeing, and I think I'm closer to the Ben side of it. I don't think he's complete dust. He's not Todd Gurley dust, but I'm willing to be wrong.
All right. I'm in such a good mood today that I'm going to indulge a start sit question from the chat. Noah wants to know Mixon or Darrell Henderson. Ben, I'll toss that one to you.
Ooh, man. I mean, I think it would be hard to sit Mixon here, but man, I actually kind of want to play Henderson just based on the massive team total, big home favorite. Obviously the Bengals are home favorites too, but this is closer than it should be. I can see why he's asking. I don't know that I would sit Mixon in season long just because you're kind of, I kind of am to start your studs and move on in those types of formats, but I wouldn't fault him for playing Henderson at all.
All right. It sounds like you just need to follow your heart, Noah. All right. Let's move on to this at Dallas Cleveland game here. Dallas is a 4-point home favorite. This is another big team total here and game total 56-point over under. Joe, is this game going to shoot out? It seems like we've been hoping for this from the Browns week in and week out. Is this the week?
You got to ask yourself if you think Baker is going to be able to keep up. I think just we haven't seen like this Cleveland team really air it out at all. They've been like the most run heavy team in the entire league this year. But if they do that, I don't expect them to really keep pace with what Dallas is able to do on the other side. So maybe this is the spot that maybe Odell Beckham he's been seeing the volume. Maybe he hasn't quite hit his ceiling yet. Maybe this is the week for that. I think there's a lot of enticing options on the Dallas side, of course, like Ezekiel Elliott's going to be extremely popular at that price point, doesn't even matter. I think that the bigger question is still with Dallas always going to be which wide receivers do you play between. Maybe if you put Amari a tier ahead, but Gallup versus Lamb is something we're going to be talking about the entire year, probably. I think that the difference now is we saw their prices so close together last week and the week before, but now CeeDee Lamb's only 5,400. So his price has gone down a lot. So I'm kind of on the Lamb side, but I'm curious what you guys think about the pass catchers if you're rolling out some Dak stacks.
Yeah, what do you think on that, Gretch? Gallup having that big game finally, but Lamb still looking like his volume's probably a little bit easier to project.
Yeah, I mean, kind of exactly what Holka said. I'm leaning towards Lamb. Gallup's the deep threat. We're not seeing as many targets per route, as much consistent volume, but he has the boom potential, which we saw late last week. And really, he wasn't necessarily smashing until late. I think that, Lamb didn't run as many routes last week. There's all this talk of whether he was banged up or it was a usage thing. I'm willing to go back to Lamb and assume that he's going to play plenty and not rotate because it didn't really make much sense. He's a full-time player in weeks 1 and 2 and very productive, and he's obviously very good. And I think his role is a lot more stable. So he's the one that I prefer, especially because of that price difference that Holka noted.
Now, everyone knows at my heart, I'm a hand builder. I have my notes here for the week. I write down the plays I like, but every once in a while, in a moment of weakness, I will look at what an optimizer is saying. And Joe, early on in this week, the optimizer loved it. Some Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham. You bring it back with Ezekiel Elliott. Can I trust the opto and play a Baker double stack?
I mean, you're talking to another hand building truther. Like I don't do a ton of stuff like that in MMA anyway. I think there's definitely value in looking to see what the data and what the optimizers are throwing us if you just look at it from that perspective. But I don't know, man. I kind of like the other side of this game. Maybe that makes me a fish, and bringing it back with someone like Chubb on the other side, if you really wanted to go with that type of stack. I don't know. The Baker thing scares me. He doesn't run a ton overall. I think that if I was going to have a piece of Cleveland, it would be either OBJ or Chubb, but it would probably be as a bring back only. I'm not super big on that game, but I might be in the minority there.
Yeah, Gretch, what are your thoughts on the running back situation? It does seem like Hunt is going to play. I mean, Chubb is running just so pure right now, but he's been getting decent game scripts to do it. Do you have a lean on an RB here?
I'm playing neither because I think you kind of said it right. The game scripts matter, and they're going to go very running back heavy when they can, but and probably even when they can't, because they're who the offense is built on. But I think there's going to be a lot of games where they can't combine for 3 or 4 touchdowns like they have the last couple of weeks, and then you're talking about a split backfield that's not as productive overall. I don't want to play Baker double stacks, but I do think that the play for the Brown side for me is in the passing game. And I'm not, like I said, not playing Baker. The one that I'm actually kind of interested in is Jarvis Landry, who hasn't done much yet, but in a game where they might throw a lot more, he can certainly bunch together targets. Wasn't fully healthy coming into the season, hopefully getting a little healthier as we go, has been efficient when he's gotten work so far. So he's somebody that I'm bringing back some of my DAC stacks with.
Yes, the secret is out of the bag on Jarvis Landry because our pal Ian Harditz has choppered Jarvis Landry. So based on his track record this season, maybe that means he's not going to do well. But I do like the spot for Jarvis Landry. I love you, Ian. I just had to get a dig in on your chopper record plays
Peter,
here so far.
You mentioned the chopper. I have a question for you. This is one of my favorite props of the week to target for this game. What do you guys think about Jarvis Landry on his receptions prop? At DraftKings Sportsbook, we have over 4.5 at plus 110 and under 4.5 at minus 137. I want to hammer that over, I think. I mean, especially you get one of those odds boosts they've been giving out. What do you guys think about that?
So I want to throw this to you guys. I think the issue so far with Landry has been his health. Early on in the season, he was dealing with a hip thing. Ben, is Jarvis Landry healthy right now, do you think?
I don't know. That's tough to say. He's playing plenty of snaps and he's running plenty of routes. I think the issue the last 2 weeks a little bit more has just been the run lean because they've been in plus script. So they've been able to kind of limit the pass volume. I don't think they'll be able to necessarily limit that this week. And so I do like the over on that as well. I think there's going to be more pass attempts and this should be a spot where his targets and receptions, tick up.
Holka, over under on that one.
Well, I wasn't actively trying to fade the chopper play, so I got to go over on this now. We love Ian. I think 4.5 is reasonable in terms of where the line's at. I think that over, especially with the game script that we're expecting in this spot, I think over for sure.
All right, let's move on to another game with shootout potential. It is Minnesota at Houston. Houston 3.5-point home favorites, 53.5 over under here for the points. What are you guys liking here from this game? Lots of interesting plays for DFS.
Go ahead, Ben. You're the guest.
I mean, I think the way that I'm building my lineups, it's almost like I think this is going to go under, but I'm not sure I like that because both these defenses are not very good. Obviously, you have to like Deshaun Watson, right? And he's a cash consideration, and certainly you want some stacks there. Brandon Cooks is so cheap. Will Fuller's still going to have decent ownership from what I'm seeing. I was kind of hoping that because Cooks is so cheap that Fuller might go overlooked and we might get a little bit of a leverage spot there, but I don't think that's going to happen. And then Dalvin is kind of the forgotten about high-priced running back that I'm sprinkling in, but I'm not playing any of these plays as much as probably I feel like I should. I certainly have them on my list. I'm going to some of these other games, and maybe it's just that I don't trust the Minnesota offense right now. Kirk Cousins has not been good so far. And we obviously haven't seen the ceiling from Deshaun Watson yet. If this blows up, I'm probably going to miss it. But these are not offenses right now that have shown us enough that I'm as excited as I am about, the Seattle offense or some of these other offenses. Maybe that's a little fishy.
Joe, Brandon Cooks, 4,500 on DraftKings, definitely mispriced. He is going to be popular. Is that chalk you're willing to eat, or do you want to look elsewhere?
I just love this game overall. I think that Cooks, team high in air yard share, 27%. He's playing 88% of the snaps for Houston. I think that he's just clearly at least $1,000 underpriced on DraftKings for this game environment. I think one of the things that I keep coming back to in this spot is, yes, the defenses are bad, but also neither one of these defenses pressures very well. So 2.8% sack rate this year with Danielle Hunter on the IR for Minnesota. So I love that Watson's going to have a little bit more time than he's used to, since this offensive line is not very good for Houston. Also on the other side of the ball, Kirk Cousins, 9.3 yards per attempt last week when Minnesota ran 62 offensive plays. And again, Houston is bottom 6 in QB hit rate this year too. So I just don't think that either quarterback is going to have to worry about being under siege in this spot. I think that the Minnesota emergence of Jefferson helps Thielen a ton. I think Thielen's underpriced. I like a ton of plays in this game. Ben did a great job of mentioning that Dalvin might be the forgotten kind of bell cow running back at the top end. So I think that this entire game shapes up really well for DFS. I think that this game, I'm definitely on the over of this spot overall. And I think there's a ton of different directions you can go in tournaments.
Ben, one guy we haven't really mentioned yet is Justin Jefferson, coming off of that monster game. He's a guy that's a riddle for me, because I can't really peg if this is the emergence of a new trend and he's really, paying off on his draft capital, or if this is like, okay, low passing volume offense and these weeks are going to be hard to come by. Where are you landing on Jefferson?
I think the latter more so than the former, but this is going to be a higher passing volume game probably. So this is not like long term. I don't think it's great for Adam Thielen. I don't think it's a situation where Minnesota is going to be able to support both, because they love to run on the early down pass rate that has been so positive for teams like Seattle and Green Bay and Buffalo, and why those offenses are being so have been so successful. Minnesota's early down pass rate is much lower than what we would expect based on their game situations when they're running plays. They're choosing to run more frequently than they're choosing to pass. But this could certainly be a spot where Houston gets out ahead and they're kind of forced into throwing. And then, the big thing with Jefferson last week is the role did improve. His route percentage jumped to 90%. He kind of put BC Johnson in the back seat. He'd kind of been splitting those routes with BC Johnson, and then he performed. So you'd expect that to stick. I do kind of like going back to Thielen here, though, as Holka noted. I'm not avoiding this game. I'm certainly sprinkling them in around my lineups, but I'm not really like stacking it in a lot of GPPs. It's just it's a game. Like, I agree with Holka. I'm looking at it. And I should like all these plays more. I'm just not really on them as heavily as I feel like I should be.
All right, we're going to have inactives coming in here in about 5 minutes. We will keep you up to date on those. I don't think we have too many big ones that at least the shoe's going to drop, but we'll check in on that. Let's move on to this Seattle at Miami game. Another game with shootout potential. Seattle 5.5 point road favorites, 54 point over under here. Holka, are you going to bet a side here? Seattle, I kind of like the Seattle side.
Yeah, in terms of a side, I think that Seattle is definitely the side that I would be on overall. I love this game. This is like the one that stood out to everyone right away. I think that both sides of the ball squarely in play for fantasy and for DFS. I think that overall, like I've been talking myself out of some of these Russell Wilson type of plays because they're so expensive. If you're pairing the wide receivers with them, there's a bunch of different directions you can go on the Miami side, but Fitz is just so cheap in a game where we know he's going to be behind and have to throw. Again, another defense that doesn't do a lot of pressuring in Seattle. So Fitz having a little bit more time for some of these weapons to get downfield. I think Gesicki's in play. Like all these guys, like take your pick on the Miami side. There's plenty of ways to bring it back from a cheap perspective over there. I don't know, like paying all the way up for Russ, Lockett, and Metcalf, like you really have to get a little bit more thin the rest of the way, and it doesn't allow you to play two of these stud running backs. So that's my biggest issue with Russ overall. But this game, there's not a whole lot that you can really do to poke holes in it. There's going to be points. There's going to be fireworks. Hopefully we keep seeing Russ cook.
That's right. Yeah. And, the concern would be if they don't let Russ cook, that they finally go back to Chris Carson in a game that they can handle. The interesting thing about Chris Carson, he had that mild MCL sprain. It seemed like he would for sure sit out a week or two, at least come back after their bye. Nope. It seems like he is a full go today, and Carlos Hyde is actually the one that is doubtful. Ben, where are you on the Russ Cook movement being here to stay, or would they revert back to their ways here with a 10-point lead earlier in the game?
I'm trusting it. I mean, they're throwing a lot early on early downs. That is what we talked about this offseason, that it was certainly possible. It's the first time that Russ really kind of came out, and he's kind of more soft spoken. He came out and he was saying, "Look, we need to do something differently offensively." And when you have an MVP caliber player talking about that, you had to wonder, is he going to have a little sway here? And it certainly seems like he did. And then you talk about, okay, Chris Carson's banged up. Seattle's secondary is atrocious. They're getting absolutely torched on the other side, which certainly is just going to put Seattle in more passing situations as well. We know Fitzpatrick likes to throw the ball around. This is the game that is probably the reason that I'm not playing as much Houston and Minnesota. I know it's going to be super popular, but I can't really go away from Russell right now. It seems like he's stat chasing. It seems like he's going after that MVP season. I just want to, while people are not sure if it's going to stick, I want to continue to be on it. And I think Fitzpatrick is game to get into a shootout with Russ and chuck the ball around. And that's how you attack Seattle anyway, is down the field. So I like Devontae Parker. I like Mike Gesicki. I like all the key pieces that you would expect in this game. I know they're going to be popular, but I'm still certainly making sure I'm overweight on pretty much all of them.
Yeah. Joe, I know you are very intrigued with Fitzpatrick and the Dolphins as well. I'm having a hard time deciding between Gesicki and Preston and Parker and even Gaskin as well. Do you have a favorite out of that group if you're doing bringbacks?
Yeah, I think it's Gesicki, just because I don't really like the tight end position overall this week. He still leads this team in air yards at 31% and also in targets. So I think that, yes, Fitzpatrick is going to have to throw against the Seahawks. So I like the ceiling a bit more for Gesicki. Obviously, strong safety Jamal Adams is out with that groin injury for Seattle also. So I think that's definitely interesting. I think that downfield, though, Ben makes a good point. Like that's another area that we can attack the Seattle team. That's why Russ has been able to cook in a lot of ways, just because his defense has been very bad on the other side. So I can't wait to see Fitz chuck it around a little bit. He's really underpriced. Like I'm going to have multiple stacks and combinations of this game for sure.
Ben, you have the Washington Huskies helmet over your shoulder. Myles Gaskin, is he going to continue to ball out?
Look, this is not a homer take. His role continues to grow, and the thing that was so shocking last week in their Thursday night game was they actually got out in front. Fitz only threw 20 times. They threw for fewer than 200 pass yards. That's a scenario where I would, if you'd have told me that would have happened going into that game, I would have anticipated the veterans, especially Jordan Howard, would have got more run in the second half. Gaskin's snap percentage rose. He was in the first couple weeks looking like this receiving back, certainly running most of their routes and seeing a lot of their targets. His receiving role is very impressive, but then he gets 22 carries. He wasn't very efficient in that spot, but they are just like leaning on him even more. He got more work in near the goal line than he has at any point earlier in the season, and actually showed some potential for a touchdown, although Jordan Howard did get the little 1-yard touchdown in that game. I think Gaskin is pretty underpriced in a high total spot like this, especially if they start trailing with the way that he's been catching passes. I don't know how on DraftKings, especially, he doesn't do fine at that $5,000 price tag. So he's certainly someone that I'm adding into all these stacks.
Yeah, definitely. Let's take a couple questions here as these inactives trickle in. I did just see from Mortensen, DeAndre Hopkins is officially active. We'll have a few more of these trickling in here. There's a question from Aaron from a DFS perspective. It looks like he's talking FanDuel, but we can mention either. What's the lowest salary defense you guys would play? I'll say right now, I'm a fan of punting defense. A lot of these things might look gross, but defensive scoring is so random that you can justify a lot. But Holka, on this slate, is there a preferred punt defense?
So I was saying all week that I thought Houston at 2,500 was the cheapest that I would go. Like I'm not scared to attack these games. I think there's going to be points. We know Cousins will make mistakes. We talked a lot about both of those defenses not being able to pressure a ton. So that's a concern, but I think they'll be passing in that game, which is something that we want for sure. I think that if there was a cheaper option than that, maybe Cleveland against Dallas for a lot of the same reasons, except Cleveland is one of those teams that'll pressure. We know there's going to be some fireworks in that Dallas and Cleveland game. So I kind of like the idea of being on the other side. If maybe Cleveland gets a defensive touchdown or something like that, maybe you leverage a good majority of the field. But I'm with Pete. Like I'm almost always trying to figure out ways to pay down a defense, because the touchdown variance of the position overall is something that we should be trying to take advantage of with ownership. I think if you're paying all the way up, there's great options up there, Tampa Bay, Baltimore, but I just don't see myself getting there in roster construction.
Yeah, Ben, how about you? Any defensive takes?
I guess the biggest one would be that I I agree completely in the theory of everything you guys said about paying down at defense, but I do try to kind of force myself to pay up in some situations. It worked pretty well for me with Indianapolis last week. I'm playing some Rams, I'm playing some Bucks because you're getting the better matchup. You're getting it is very random, but you're getting a good spot and probably at lower ownership. So there is maybe some contrarian element there. I mean, those teams are still going to be popular, but they're not going to be overwhelmingly popular, especially with the crowd that is building lineups kind of similar to the types of lineups that I'm building. So I kind of like the, pay up to get a better matchup at a lower ownership if you do think a defense is flying under the radar. But I am playing plenty of Texans. And the other one is the Panthers. I mean, we know Arizona, Kyler has taken some sacks and thrown some picks early this year. So you want to leverage some what won't be necessarily a high-owned Kyler Murray this week, but I think playing Carolina's defense at home isn't a horrible other cheap option.
Yeah, I'm playing a decent amount of Ronald Jones and Darrell Henderson in DFS, and I've enjoyed pairing those guys up with their respective defenses as well, kind of in that mid-tier. No bombshells yet coming in with inactives, just a couple little interesting things. Travion Williams is inactive for the Bengals, which means they're probably not concerned about Joe Mixon's health, not carrying that extra running back. Speaking of Washington Huskies, Ben, John Ross inactive again. So that should be good news for T. Higgins maintaining his snap share. I'll be sure to pass along anything else I see, but so far pretty quiet from the news and notes standpoint. Let's move on to this Tampa Bay game. I just mentioned Ronald Jones. They are, of course, 7-point favorites versus the Chargers. This has one of the lower totals on the week, 42.5 points. Holka, you messing around with this game at all?
Not really, man. I understand why people want to go to Ronald Jones because he's, again, like a very clear price tier below some of these other guys that we're talking about. I think this fading Ronald Jones thing has only really burnt me once over the last 2 years, that week where he had like 7 catches out of nowhere. So I'm probably going to let other people mess around with that in DFS just because I think there's so many good running back plays overall in this spot. Like if there was one guy to go to in this game, like it's probably going to be someone. Is this the later game, Pete?
It is. Yep.
Yeah, so I think that this is.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at this is 1 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, so I was going to say maybe it's a late swap game, but I don't even think it's that for me, if I'm being honest. But Pete, I know you want to talk about your boy Rob Gronkowski, so we don't have Dieter to talk about tight ends today. But can we play this guy at 3,600? I'm not there, but maybe you are.
So I'm actually going to toss this right back over to Ben because Rob Gronkowski is a guy that I don't like. I thought he was dusted, and then I'm reading Stealing Signals, and I'm seeing what Ben's telling me about his usage, and I'm like, I actually have to consider this guy with Godwin out. That's correct, right, Ben?
Oh.
I mean, it's correct to the extent that he's on my list to consider as well, but I haven't put him in any lineups. I mean, it's not a name I want to click right now. But yeah, his routes ticked up a little bit last week. He played a massive snap share, ran routes on 63% of dropbacks. He was at 51% the first couple weeks. He's certainly a key part of this passing game. I also think OJ Howard's going to be involved in this game. I think we'll see both tight ends, see a decent amount of targets with Godwin out and Scott Miller banged up. Is Miller active? We haven't. Have we seen that yet? Did you mention that?
I'm keeping tabs on it. It sounds like he's going to be good. I haven't seen an inactive on him yet.
So the reason I'm curious about that is the other guy I'm looking at, and Mike Evans is certainly an option here as well. But the other guy I'm looking at is Justin Watson. I don't want to, but as a cheaper receiver option, he ran routes on 89% of dropbacks in week 2 when Godwin was out. There is at least there's certainly potential that he can make value at 3,400. He's not a good play. He's not somebody you should get in a lot of lineups, but he can make some stacks work. And I think he could be kind of the sneaky punt wide receiver this week that no one has really talked about. They need somebody to catch passes, and Evans hasn't had a huge target share so far. And Watson's week 2 role would indicate that he should probably play a pretty big role this week.
So Ben, Joe, no one seems ready to go back to Austin Eckler coming off of that big 30-point game on DraftKings last week. He's going to be under 5% in most contests. Is there anything on the Chargers side, maybe specifically with this backfield that you want to mess around with this stout Bucks D?
So Eckler's 7,100, man. Like I understand, like they got aggressive with pricing him up after that week that he had. So I'm not really on that. I think I prefer just finding the salary to get to Dalvin Cook and DFS. I think one that's really interesting is Keenan Allen because he's looking like he's not going to be owned very much, but just looking at his prop, I think that he's one that stood out to me right away this morning when I was going through those. So we can get Keenan Allen at over 4.5 receptions. It's minus 160 right now at blitzbet.eu. So I think that's one that I would definitely be hammering the over on. Keenan Allen in back-to-back games has seen 10 plus targets. Like he had 7 or more catches in 2 straight games as well. So like 4.5 catches for Keenan Allen for a Tampa Bay team that really is a stout defense. So I would imagine that there's not going to be a ton of time back there. So these short kind of intermediate throws to Keenan, I think that's an amazing prop to go after. But I think that Hunter Henry is always in play, especially a week like this where tight end is kind of gross. So I think Hunter Henry in tournaments would be my favorite option from a DFS perspective, but I don't really like this game overall. I'll say that.
Yeah, I did just confirm Scotty Miller is active. The only inactive that is of note so far is Carlos Hyde is out for the Seahawks. So that just leaves behind the pass catcher, Travis Homer, and then the rookie DJ Dallas behind Chris Carson. So it seems like Chris Carson should be teed up for a full workload. Let's move on here to the last of these 1 p.m. games. It is Baltimore at Washington. They're 14-point road favorites, 45.5 over under here. Holka, is it a trap? Is it a fish play to bet Baltimore to cover here after the bad loss against the Chiefs?
Well, you tell me, man. In our winner take all tournament, we took Baltimore and the points.
That was your suggestion, I believe.
Are you going to put that one on me? You're going to put this massive favorite on me in a winner take all. I guess before I even get to that, how popular do you think they'll be in the super contest this week? Like minus what is it at right now? What line did we get? Minus 13.5?
I think so. Yeah.
Well, I don't know, man. I think Baltimore's going to roll for sure. So it's kind of always a tough bet to make with those kind of situations. I don't really like this game for DFS because I don't have a lot of, I guess, security in feeling that Washington's going to be able to keep up. Like I know a lot of people want to talk about Logan Thomas at 3,500. There's a lot of things, I guess, from a volume perspective that would make sense. Like Haskins just isn't throwing a lot of catchable balls overall right now. So do we want Logan Thomas in a massively low total situation? Sure. Good game script. Sure. The volume should be there. I don't know. Like I mentioned, that tight end seems gross. I just really kind of don't want to miss out on the Logan Thomas thing because the volume is there, but I don't know, man. I don't know if I can do it. Overall, this game is really scary for DFS.
Yeah. Ben, what is jumping out for you in this game? I really want to go back to Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I mean, that's the tight end I want to play here. I'm totally with Holka. Like Logan Thomas, in theory, should be a good play.
Right.
I just can't do it again, man. I can't do it again. I've done it enough the last few weeks. I'm over it. I'm moving on. I don't know that whether it's his own ability because he's a converted quarterback who doesn't have a long history of making a lot of plays, or probably more likely Dwayne Haskins' ability. None of this really sets up well against Baltimore's defense. But Mark Andrews is the play here for me. I think paying up at tight end and getting up to him in a week where it's pretty gross is kind of interesting because Andrews had that bad week last week on prime time, had some drops, but the volume's been there. The role has been bigger this year than it was last year. And I think there's the potential for him in kind of a get right spot. I don't know that those really exist for tight ends, but to the extent that they do, kind of a confidence building spot, there's certainly 2 touchdown potential for him pretty much every week. But this is a spot where we should expect Baltimore to be scoring plenty. And I think Andrews is certainly one of my favorite tight end plays of the week.
Joe, we were talking with Leone about some of our lineups. He's mentioning that no one's going to play Terry McLaurin. He was on the injury report, but he is now good to go. Do you trust McLaurin coming back here versus the Ravens?
No, I don't. I just think that the biggest thing you got to look at from a spot like this is like, where is Terry McLaurin's like value? Like, where is his ceiling, I guess? And it's if he has time to kind of get downfield. And I don't think there's going to be any time for him in this spot. I think that Haskins is going to be under siege this entire game. It's not like we got like much of a price discount on Terry McLaurin. Like a lot of times, at least in past years, we've seen DraftKings kind of adjust pricing a little bit more for matchups than I have recently. Like he's basically the same price that he has been against this Baltimore team. I don't really want anything to do that. I understand Leone and his contrarian kind of mindset overall, that it's at least intriguing, but yeah, I don't think that I'm on anything really on the Washington side in this game.
All right, let's move on here to our 4 p.m. games. We were talking about Darrell Henderson earlier. They're 13-point favorites versus the Giants at home, 48-point over under here. Earlier in the week, I was kind of liking how Goff and Kupp and Woods were looking for DFS. People have kind of spooked me off them with how big this total is and how much we think they'll be able to get done on the ground. Ben, what do you think about this game?
Yeah, for me, it's mostly just Henderson and the Rams D where I can pay up for them. I do think they are a pretty interesting defense play, with that theory of paying up and trying to be a little bit contrarian, because I think it's a great spot for them with this massive spread. I expect the Rams to be out ahead. They've been very efficient offensively, and then you have Daniel Jones trying to catch up. That's the recipe for some big turnovers. So Henderson and the Rams maybe sprinkling in a little cup, but I'm concerned about the ceiling for the passing game, certainly.
Joe, what about you here? Can we potentially see a shootout here? Could anyone like Slayton or Ingram or Tate get going for the Giants and keep this competitive?
Yeah, this is one that I mean, I wasn't really on board with the passing game for LA. Like, I understand that people want to like try and find the ceiling that Goff has shown at times. I guess don't like playing those guys that don't run at all, but also like his A dot is extremely low. He's like got one of the lowest A dots in the league right there with like Derek Carr. So I don't think that's super enticing. I understand the Robert Woods thing if you want to go there. I think I'm with you guys. Like, it is Henderson for me. If there's one play in this game, like, I mean, they're 2 touchdown favorites essentially at home. This Giants team has faced the 5th most rushing attempts this year. So I think the Rams, like, what they want to do is they want to run. So I think that he's a guy that stands out as being a little bit underpriced. I wish he was a little bit more active in the passing game if we really wanted to lock him in on DraftKings. So I think I prefer him on FanDuel. But I think he's still a guy. If there's one play in this game, I think it's Henderson.
Yeah, Henderson is setting up real nice. I mean, is there any chance, Ben, that he could actually even start catching some passes, or do you think Malcolm Brown's still going to get those looks?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say. It was weird last week that Malcolm Brown ran so many more routes. Henderson was so efficient late in the second half in week 2? What week are we in now? Week 4 now? Late in week 2, and then week 3, obviously last week, was very efficient on the ground. So clearly their best back right now with Akers out. But Malcolm Brown ran way more routes, like Joe noted. I am hopeful maybe that there's some potential that could swing back. There's not like any real clearly defined roles here. And Henderson's the guy that, after they drafted him last offseason, they were comparing to Alvin Kamara. We thought he would have this pass catching role last year that never cropped up. He's certainly been very good in open space. So maybe we'll get a few more receptions this week than what the past trends would indicate is likely. I'm not necessarily buying that he's not going to be used in the passing game just because he's been so efficient overall and so clearly the best back. You'd think that they might expand that and just get him even more touches.
Yeah. Ben or Joe, any other elements of this game that we should hit on here before we move on?
No, man, I think we pretty much covered it. I don't think there's really much here in this from a DFS perspective. I don't know. It seems like a game that there's not going to be a ton of points overall.
Yeah. All right. 4:25 p.m. Eastern, we have Buffalo at the Raiders, a team that continues to burn me. I feel like I'm on the wrong side of them every week. Buffalo is a 3.5 point road favorite, 52.5 point over under. I really like Josh Allen again. I like going back to Diggs. Ben, are you on board with running it back with these Bills guys?
Yeah, this is one I think is going to go over, and I definitely like Allen a lot. I like Diggs and Waller. Waller, both are guys that weren't very productive last week, especially in terms of yardage. Diggs got the TD, but these are guys that are both high priced. They're not coming off big weeks. I think Waller probably will be pretty popular because he is pretty affordable over on DraftKings, especially at like 5,200. But I love that Diggs-Waller combo as a little mini correlation in lineups where I'm stacking other games. And yeah, I like this game overall. The other one is Josh Jacobs, I think, is a really strong play this week. Buffalo, I believe, is dead last in success rate allowed per sharp football against the run. So this is not I know that the Raiders' offensive line's banged up, and that's an important point, but this is not an imposing rush defense like maybe it was in prior years. And I think we're going to see a lot of Josh Jacobs and probably efficient Josh Jacobs. I expect we'll still see plenty of Josh Allen throwing on early downs. That's what we've been seeing. And then that kind of pushes Vegas into maybe some later passing as well. I like this game. I think it's going to go over.
Chase is asking me where my hard hat is. Well, I'm going to throw that on right when we finish up the show and I finish hand building my lineups, but I'll give you a little peek here what it looks like when we build our lineups. Joe, any love for some of these ancillary pass catching options? Hunter Renfrow and John Brown are two guys that I think could benefit from this game environment and might go overlooked in DFS.
Yeah, I took a nice 0 from John Brown. I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, but definitely been long on this Buffalo passing game, which has been great. I think that Renfro at 4,600 is something that's really interesting. You talked about Darren Waller. Patriots kind of, after like really focusing on him, like Renfro was basically just like on his own for a lot of those catches he had last week. I think that's a spot we can go back to, obviously, with Henry Ruggs and Bryan Edwards out. So I think that overall, like, there's definitely some pieces of this game that are super interesting on the Oakland side. Definitely want to be on the Josh Allen side from a DFS perspective. Pete, I'm going to put you on the spot, though. Do you remember who you compared Diggs to last night on our call with Leone?
Yeah, I said
let's hear it.
What? No, he said his usage is similar to DeAndre Hopkins. He's an alpha. I mean, he's not getting the exact volume, but in his role in this offense is similar to DeAndre Hopkins. So are you going to hold my feet to the fire?
No. I was just going to preface it as like, I think it was sharp in the fact that like we want to be like really early on these type of guys where they're seeing like I mean, people don't understand the usage that Diggs has really been seeing so far. We see him like as Diggs and how he was in Minnesota, like this kind of boomer bust, like really strong deep threat. But if there's a chance that like this is just like the perfect marriage between him and Josh Allen, like maybe Stephon Diggs is like a tier above, or we're all kind of thinking about him in our head. So I thought that was sharp that you mentioned that yesterday.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's also similar is that because Kyler and Josh Allen are both running quarterbacks, that you don't necessarily have to double stack them. You can play just Kyler to Hopkins or Allen to Diggs. And then like Ben mentioned, there's lots of good bring back options if you want to go the Jacobs route or the Waller. I think both of those guys are such usage hogs for the Raiders that that's just a really simple skinny stack. And then it also allows you to fit in a lot of other one-offs that you might like, because sometimes you do these game stacks. Next thing you know, you have like 2 more positions left that you can fill in. So I definitely like having some of those skinny stacks from a DFS perspective here. Let's move on here to which game? So we have Indianapolis, who is at Chicago. That game was initially 1 p.m. They flexed it to the 4 p.m. slate. We got Chicago as a 3-point home dog, 43-point over under here. A lot of people aren't going to be playing this game from a DFS perspective. Ben, what are you seeing here? Any angles you would like to bet, or is this a stay away for you?
Yeah, I don't really love this game. Jonathan Taylor is certainly one that I want to go back to a little bit. Was very chalky last week and let some people down. I think that was maybe not predictable, but it was certainly a role or a situation where I wasn't necessarily on him in a lot of tournaments. I did play him in cash because I think he was, certainly priced appropriately where we could play him in cash, but they talked a lot about wanting to get Hines more involved after barely using him in week 2. And we saw that early. They didn't run a lot of plays. They didn't even touch the ball offensively until there's 5 minutes left in the first quarter because the Jets threw a pick 6 right away. And then they had a long drive after that. And then late, Jordan Wilkins milks the game out in the fourth quarter. And so Taylor really got the majority of his work just in the second and third quarters. I still think he's very clearly the lead back in this offense. Very, very good behind a great offensive line. All those things work very well in his favor. He's going to have some monster weeks this year, and this is a good spot, I think, to try to see if that can hit. You want to like David Montgomery as well on the other side with Tariq Cohen out, and Nick Foles is probably more likely to throw to backs, and so Montgomery's receiving role could increase pretty substantially because he could run some more routes and see a higher rate of routes because we have this immobile quarterback under center now. But I just don't know that I really like him in the spot. There's a lot of other running backs in his range that I want to play instead. And then, you can go back to T.Y. Hilton with all the other Indianapolis receiver injuries, but not sure I like that. I'm not going to Mo Alley Cox, who ran seven routes last week. There's just not a lot of spots in this game that I actually want to go to.
What about you, Ben? Any spots that you're willing to go? Jonathan Taylor, pretty interesting. You could maybe talk yourself into Allen Robinson with Nick Foles. I'm not finding much else, though, that I like.
The hard thing about this slate overall, Pete, is we don't really have a lot of chalk in the afternoon. So, like, I think this game would have been okay if we were using it for leverage and for late swaps. Like, maybe T.Y. Hilton is in that conversation. Maybe we get the post grandma hype sleeper type of play with T.Y. Hilton at 5,900. I think he's someone that, like Ben mentioned, that we have Campbell out, we have Pittman out. So maybe there's just a little bit more to go around for T.Y. in this spot. I love Jonathan Taylor as a pivot. But again, like, who are you pivoting away from? If you have like this type of salary left in your roster, you probably already played someone in the morning game. So I think that's the most frustrating thing for me on this slate is I think there's a lot of good plays, but a lot of them are at the 1 p.m. games.
Yeah. Yeah, the only guy that is just kind of standing out for me is Jonathan Taylor. But like you said, you're just going to already build him in your lineup, and you're not going to be thinking about it from a late swap perspective here. Let's touch on the Sunday night game and Monday night quickly, and then we'll circle back for a couple questions in the chat as we wrap up here. If you guys haven't subscribed to the Line Movement channel, hit that button down below, hit the like. We have posted Ben's Substack newsletter in here. It's only $5 a month, a ridiculous amount of information that comes out every Tuesday morning. Is that when it is, Ben? Tuesday-ish?
Monday afternoon is the Thursday night and early Sunday games. And then Tuesday afternoon, I finish up with a later Sunday and Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. So there's 2 versions of it.
Yeah, it is the best possible primer to kind of reorient yourself after a new week of what are the new trends, what stuff that has happened, and then how to apply that looking forward. Honestly, cannot recommend it enough. It is way too cheap. Get in before Ben gets sensible and raises the price on that. Tonight, we have the Eagles at home they are on the road at San Francisco, who's a 7-point favorite. Holka, I mean, everyone is out on Carson Wentz. ESPN ran a promo for this week, and instead of using Wentz as the quarterback in the promo, they used Nick Mullins. Is there any hope for this Eagles franchise now on the road here against a really talented 49ers team that is getting George Kittle back?
Oh my God, man. Is that true? That's horrible.
Yeah.
I was very, very long on Carson Wentz last week and just got slapped in the face for it. Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to just completely jump off, but I still think Miles Sanders is like one of my favorite plays in this entire game. Like all these Philly skill position players that like are down right now. I think that Sanders is like the one guy that emerges probably with a little bit more volume. Still 23 and 22 touches over the last 2 weeks. So I think that he's the guy that I am most interested in. I think from a betting perspective, this game's a little bit tougher because I'm still not exactly sure what we're going to get from San Fran. This defense obviously is a shell of itself, obviously with the injuries that they have overall. So I've been struggling a lot with San Francisco lines. Do you guys have any clear lean, I guess, on either side of this game? I think this is a stay away for me.
I actually do have a pretty big. I don't know. I don't know how much how committed I am to it, but I think Eagles +7 is quite a bit of value. They have the worst turnover differential in the NFL, -7. I don't necessarily think they're going to turn the ball over 2+ times in every single game. San Francisco is coming off just beatdowns of the Jets and Giants, where they probably didn't get challenged as much with all these injuries that they've had, right? Like they have Bosa out, they have Richard Sherman out, D Ford, so many injuries. Yes, they're getting Kittle back. They're getting Deebo Samuel back as well. But, you still, as bad as Wentz has played, you still have to take Wentz over Mullins in terms of the quarterbacks. So I like the Miles Sanders take too. I mean, they have a low team total, but I think this -7 spread is pretty wide. And all the recent results, especially, looking at the Eagles turnover differential and then the way that San Fran has really beat down on some really inferior opponents. Maybe the Eagles are also inferior. That's where I'm not as confident, but that is my certainly my lean where the value is on this 7-point line.
All right, guys, we have a few more minutes here. We want to hit on some props, maybe also grab a couple questions from the chat. As far as tomorrow, Monday Night Football, looks like we are going to get that doubleheader with KC and New England. Cam Newton, obviously out. It sounds like Brian Hoyer is getting the start as opposed to Jarrett Stidham. Otherwise, not too many injuries in that game. As far as Green Bay hosting Atlanta, it sounds like both Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones are trending in the right direction. Russell Gage, who had the concussion, is going to play. And other than that, on the Green Bay side, we already knew Alan Lazard was out. So that should be a good game. But let's talk about the matter at hand here. There was a question in the chat from Aaron, Mike Davis or Gaskin? I go Mike Davis as much as I love Gaskin. Either of you guys going to take Gaskin there?
I'm on the Davis side, so I'll let the Homer pick come in if you want it. It's teed up for you.
No, I still got to take Davis. I like Gaskin, but not that much.
Yeah, we got our producer Jordan mentioning in the chat his favorite prop of the day, Mark Andrews over 3.5 receptions. I love that prop. I think people are overreacting to what happened, and as Ben said, the usage has been good. You guys smashing that over there?
Yep.
I like that one. You can get Gesicki at pretty much the same line, 3.5. There's some juice on it there. That's not great, but 3.5 receptions for Gesicki in the spot. I'd be hammering the over on that one too.
Joe TS was in the chat earlier asking about Dak over under 325 passing yards. It's a big number, but we know they like to play fast and we know they like to throw.
Man, that's like exactly the line that I'm looking at right now. So this guy wants the answers to the test in the chat. I love it. Yeah, I think that the over makes some sense. I think that like this game is one that I definitely want to be long on overall. I think that there could be a ton of points. I think Dak's someone that could hit that with you. So I think I'm on the over.
All right, Terrell Davis, I assume the former Broncos great running back, is asking, what's your lock of the week in DFS? I say we go around the horn and give our locks of the week. I'll put Joe under the spotlight now, and then we'll go Ben, and then I'll finish us off. Who's your lock, Joe?
Pete, you know me well enough. Who's my lock?
Is it Fitzpatrick?
No.
Oh, well,
Who's my lock?
Who's high on Fitzpatrick last night, so I'm worried.
I do love Fitzpatrick. Who's my running back lock?
I honestly don't know.
Come on, Pete.
Kamara
is my lock.
Oh my God, that just A+ for creativity with that.
40%. He's 40% owned. Who do you think is going to be my lock, Pete? You're going to come in with your lock being like 10%. I've got to give people the good plays along the way, also.
Yeah. I'm going sub 10 for my. Hey, Gretch, do you want to? Who do you want to tout here? Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, I could go with Zeke. I'll go. And I love Kamara. Kamara's the one that I want to be heaviest on and overweight, even at massive ownership. I'm gonna go Mark Andrews. That'll be the lock. We just talked about him. I think he scores.
All right, my lock. Normally, I go the receiver route. All the really nice plays I feel like are relatively owned. So I'm gonna pivot to running back. Pete's lock of the week: Darrell Henderson at 5,800, sub 10% ownership. He's going to have a big day today. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Line Movement Kickoff Show. Like we said, we will be back at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Joe Holka, Michael Leone, and I to tilt or hopefully sweat our lineups this week. We are maxing out the Juke, the $400 3 max, and we have a single entry team in the $1,500 game changer. So we will have plenty to sweat this week. I fortunately talked them out of going for the Mega Millionaire, although if you're watching, you probably wish that I didn't talk us out of that. Again, special thanks to Ben Gretch. We've been mentioning his newsletter. It is honestly a phenomenal resource. We'll post that in the show notes and in the chat again. Ben, thank you for joining us today, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. This is fun. Let's get some money this week, huh?
Let's do it. Let's get it. For Joe Holka, for Ben Gretch, for Line Movement, I'm Peter Overzet. We will see you guys at 6:30 for the Tilt Space.